What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by Vanessa Carlton. Basically, this album is called Be Not Nobody, and it came out in the spring of 2002. Now, this album is known for the large hit single 1,000 Miles, which was a pretty large song throughout 2002. Almost won a Grammy for Song of the Year of that particular year. It's basically a pretty tapioca, white as mayonnaise type pop song, but it definitely worked for what it was. I definitely respect this song for what it was. It's just pretty much like I respect this song for what it was. It's a pretty notable song out of the early 2000s and continued to have momentum, and it was just popular throughout most of the 2000s decade for a while. But the thing about this album is it went platinum, but I was kind of seeing what other hit albums she kind of had, because she was basically like Kelly Clarkson before Kelly Clarkson in certain instances. She was kind of like little touches of Avril Lavigne, little touches, kind of some touches of Avril Lavigne, kind of some touches of Kelly Clarkson, kind of some touches of Pink, but not as wholesomely much Pink, but just kind of some traces of Pink in there. And I just would have to say this is pretty much like a pretty centered and overall steadfast kind of pop album that I just wasn't expecting. It was different from the times from what kind of happened, or there was a lot more jive, and I would have to say that Vanessa Carlton kind of somewhat struggles with the more upbeat songs on here, but she is a piano songstress. She is a piano songstress, it would seem. So I would have to say she's kind of like Alicia Keys a little bit, just a little bit more contemporary than Alicia Keys, a little bit more ready for pop radio as far as that's kind of concerned, a little bit less R&B oriented. But I would have to say there are some gems on here, but the unfortunate thing about it is 1,000 Miles was such a huge hit single that really I felt like that pretty much scored like the breadth of like most people's concern about this album. And I do kind of feel like Ordinary Day is decent, the second single, but it just doesn't compare, and it's just not quite as memorable as 1,000 Miles. And then Pretty Baby, which is a decent one. Apparently there was a remix to that song also, but I've only heard the original because it's not on this original album. But I would have to say and such that basically both of the follow-up singles just don't compare to like the girth that 1,000 Miles wound up getting. Some fun facts about Vanessa Carlton is she had an album that was going to be called Rinse, and there was a song from that particular album. That album got scrapped. There are some songs from that album on here, like 1,000 Miles and such, but basically there was a song called Dark Carnival that was in the PS2 game Spy Hunter that was supposed to be on that album. So that's kind of a song I'm curious about. I wonder how good that song is. But basically, yeah, this album is kind of a swirl of things. It does a lot of different things, and for the most part, it's a pretty steadfast and pretty overall stellar kind of pop project. It just is the fact that it's just kind of offhanded and just kind of unorthodox in its approach to how it handles kind of pop. I mean, it's kind of piano, but it doesn't overtly do it, but it does do it somewhat. But for the most part, this album just does not really have like a deafening kind of jivey, outgoing kind of record. It does have like some bookstore type tunes on here, like Twilight and Sway and some of those type ones, but I would have to say it's just kind of where it does have like a sense of somewhat outgoing, but it's just kind of more coffee shop and more steadfast type stuff. Like this is an example of an album that pulls off its homely feeling. I really like the concept about it. It's a lot more homely. You can tell by the lead single 1,000 Miles that there's just not like that's just a lot more kind of just house cleaning and more homebound type concerns. But I do like the concept. You at least get faint traces of that on here. And then surprisingly enough, Vanessa Carlton does some stuff that Evanescence and Avril Lavigne would do kind of before that they were about to get towards it. So it's kind of interesting that she managed to pull that off before Evanescence had even come out and did that sort of thing. So it's interesting. She kind of wields the piano plays on here like a weapon, and it's pretty dope because a lot of these piano variations on here work pretty well. So that's kind of the concept. That's kind of the concept about it. So we'll go ahead and talk about some of the singles here. So the first single is 1,000 Miles, and this is kind of a peppy piano late summer blaze of a song, I would say. It's kind of got some bittersweet feels about it, but it's a good bass song. This is definitely one to kind of have for just like being tied down a little bit. It's definitely kind of a more kind of steadfast kind of song for Bay and that type of stuff. Definitely works in that sort of sense. It's a good peppy kind of piano song, but it just is kind of in the sense that this really feels like so late summery, just really like late August, September, that type fare. Just kind of those concepts of just like breezy kind of leaves lightly changing colors type fare, just kind of summer activities, early fall activities, just that sort of outdoor bound type stuff. It's not so much like a nightclub song at all. It's just very homely and homebound. But I like the concept of getting a song like this. It's just very much like a tapioca. It's just a tapioca mayonnaise white kind of pop song as far as that's kind of concerned. But I like the concept of just getting it, just because when I look back on like the 2000s decade, most pop songstresses really kind of had a lot more edge towards them. But it almost kind of appears like on this particular song that Vanessa Carlton almost feels defenseless somewhat. Just very vulnerable on the song as far as that kind of goes. Just really kind of dainty as far as that kind of gets, but it's just kind of a very dainty song. I think that's kind of the appeal about this song is just how homely it kind of is. But this is kind of a difficult song to follow up. I feel like this is kind of a tough song to follow up. I think Vanessa Carlton needed another addictive kind of piano type beat on here like this one to be able to catch up with it. I think this is definitely something that could have gotten fleshed out a lot more just to see what could have happened with it, because this is such a good, memorable kind of beat on here. It's very addictive and just overall contemporary as far as that kind of goes. It's very homely, but it's contemporary also, and I think that's part of why she was kind of seen as like almost a one-hit wonder, is just because there wasn't quite as much of an addictive song just in the same template as this one, which really Ordinary Day was close, but it needed another piano ballad type, needed another piano beat type feel of like 1,000 Miles. That would have definitely kind of helped as far as that kind of went, but it just was not. This was kind of like a good niche for her, and she could have had some more hit songs like this. I mean, I don't think if she would have followed up this song with another song like 1,000 Miles, it would have gotten played out. It's just the fact that it was just so short-lived, saying, hey, this is kind of a charmer right here, but it just didn't get quite fleshed out the way that it needed to, which is kind of a disappointment. But there are some other good songs. It's definitely a pretty stellar album, I will say. So the second single is Ordinary Day. The second single is Ordinary Day, and this is kind of a hazy day after hours malaise, I would say. It's a good, crisp autumn gem, I would say, and it's homely, but it's a good song. So this is kind of one, a little bit more relaxed than 1,000 Miles, a little bit less steadfast. It's kind of more like sluggish tempo, like a sluggish mid-tempo type song that just doesn't quite have the pep or the overall veneer of 1,000 Miles, but it is a pretty hazy one, and it just works as like a good after hours malaise. Just got done with class or work or something like that. Just good simmering skies, just kind of orange and purple skies as far as that kind of goes. It kind of has some of those records. Definitely like the concept of it. This one's a little bit more autumn bound. This one kind of feels a little bit more like autumn activities, just things like that as far as it kind of goes, but it's just a lot more lazy. It's just kind of the malaise of that sort of concept of just laid back and more relaxed kind of fare. It's another homely one, but it's just more kind of spread out as far as that goes. But it's good, but it's just, I can see the bite just not having the overall pep, because I definitely think the thing about 1,000 Miles is it just had a lot of pep and overall catchiness, and like the chorus, it was just a very snappy single that just was very marketable. But the Ordinary Day one was just kind of more of a malaise kind of one that just didn't quite have the energy, and probably, it's the same typical fare. I mean, when this happens in homely songs and more kind of house cleaning type music, it really takes a toll on it, just because I think she needed another song that was kind of more homely but with a little bit more jive towards it, and that's kind of the concept. It should have been followed up with a little bit more momentum as far as that kind of went, but it's not a bad song. It's just very lazy. So the third single is Pretty Baby, and this is another nice one. This one kind of has a little bit more folkish kind of haze about it. This is kind of an acoustic late summer haze, I would say. It's a Pretty Baby, the third single, is an acoustic late summer haze of a song, I would say. It's got some good folksy charm, and it's just got some tranquil kind of fun times about it. So a lot of these are just pretty low key and just kind of hang out, kind of more relaxed, kind of comfy type feels about them. But I feel like this one is probably a little bit more peppy than Ordinary Day, but not quite as peppy as 1,000 Miles, which this one's just kind of more of like a hangout kind of folk, autumn, late summer, late August, late September type fare as far as that kind of goes. Just appreciating like the more homely bound type stuff as far as that kind of goes, but still a little bit more relaxed. I still think that the tempo is still a little bit more relaxed, where I think if 1,000 Miles was kind of like an 8 or a 7.5 out of 10 in terms of tempo and snappiness, I feel like Ordinary Day was like a 3 in the tempo, and then Pretty Baby was like a 5, something like that. Just still kind of more lambent and sedate than probably what it needed to be, but it is a nice folk kind of acoustic gem that has some great production on there, so I definitely like that one. I can just see how these singles just didn't quite chart as heavily, but it makes me wonder what the remix sounds like. I'm kind of curious, but it makes me wonder about what the remix sounds like. I'm kind of curious as to how that kind of went, as to how catchy that kind of went as far as that kind of goes. But all three of the singles are pretty good, but they just don't have like the sheer bite and snappiness of 1,000 Miles. So to talk about the songs I recommend on this album, there's 7 songs out of 11 I recommend on here. So yeah, this is a pretty stellar album. I would have to say quite a few gems on here that I wound up recommending. So the 7 songs I recommend on here would be 1,000 Miles, Ordinary Day, Pretty Baby, Rinse, Sway, Paint It Black, and Wanted. So a nice one on here is Wanted. This is kind of a jittery piano gleam of a song, I would say. It's some vivid, ominous autumn music, I would definitely have to say, and it's kind of an unexpected gem, but it works. So this is some of the stuff that I was talking about where it's kind of Evanescence-like, and another one that's kind of like that is Rinse. So Rinse and Wanted are two of the more Evanescence-like songs on here that just work extremely well. But this one's pretty jittery, really uses like the piano kind of haunting feel of it as a weapon. I definitely like the concept of it. It's kind of outlandish for Vanessa Carlton. Just wasn't expecting this. When you listen to a song like 1,000 Miles, when you look at more homely and house cleaning type songs by Vanessa Carlton, like 1,000 Miles and Ordinary Day, it's just very much out of the ordinary to kind of get some of these moments like Wanted and Rinse on here, because they just paint her as like a more dark diva and kind of more edgy type chick that's just kind of unexpected as far as that kind of goes. But it's definitely a nice one. So another good one on here is Sway. This is kind of this is a good evening gem, I would say, and it's kind of bookstore and more civil type feels about it, but I would have to say it has a solid jive about it. So this is one of the more jivey songs on here. I feel like songs like Sway and Paint It Black are two of the most jivey kind of songs. It's interesting. For the most part, Vanessa Carlton kind of has like a swirl of kind of atmospheres about her where she does have some bookstore type feels. I feel like songs like Sway and Twilight, and then songs like Ordinary Day are all kind of more bookstore and kind of more homely type fares about it. But then there are some songs on here like Wanted and Rinse and Paint It Black, and to a lesser degree, and I kind of feel like Sway is somewhat like that. Sway is kind of an in-between type one, but I feel like Sway is just kind of one that kind of has like, it's a bookstore type feel, but it does have a little bit of mild jive where maybe we'll go out and have like a beer or two or something like that afterward or something like that. Just a little bit of sense of jive and bustle, but it's just kind of odd that just these homely type songs is just because you look after it. Apart from Paint It Black, there's really not like a full blown nightclub or stepping out kind of song for pretty much the entire part. But I would have to say that it's just a very brief taste of getting some of that atmosphere to kind of say that it just kind of has like, it's pop, but it just is kind of more like civil pop. And that's this kind of thing, but I like it. I like the concept. This is a pretty good niche because Kelly Clarkson, folks like Kelly Clarkson and Pink were more jivey and outgoing, and then Avril Lavigne was kind of more gothic in that sort of sense. But Vanessa Carlton has some of that gothic appeal about it, but she's also kind of just, yeah, I just would have to say it's just interesting kind of get like a more kind of like horror. This album just kind of has like a mildly haunting type feel, just kind of where it can be bookstore fare, but it's also kind of like a haunting type feel, almost Edgar Allan Poe-esque. Is something that you could listen to between mid-late August and like mid-late November, something like that. So there's some good ones on there. But Paint It Black, Paint It Back is kind of a bad girl gem, and it's a mild stepping out flash of a song, I would say, and it's probably the album's most litty song. This is definitely one that just feels like a great cover song to kind of get on here. Definitely like the appeal of this one. I definitely could see like Vanessa Carlton as a songstress doing a lot more songs like this. It definitely makes me wonder what that Dark Carnival song was like from that PlayStation game. It's interesting enough to kind of get that one. That probably should have been a song on here. I think that shouldn't have been just an exclusive to the game. I would have to say it's interesting enough to kind of see something like that. But Paint It Black definitely had like some great kind of jive about it. It's really felt like but Paint It Black definitely had the most night jive about it. It's definitely one for like a good dance floor type gem, and just overall kind of karaoke bar, or just some place where you'd be at like a coffee shop or a pub or something like that, just to kind of have some stepping out flash as far as that's kind of concerned. Just a nice one, but it's basically the only song like it on here. Maybe Sway to a very lesser extent, but I just would have to say Sway and Paint It Black are the two jiviest songs on here, but Paint It Black is definitely a highlight. And then Rinse is another one that's kind of similar to Wanted, like I was saying. This is another Evanescence type tune. This is kind of decently ominous. This is kind of a decently ominous piano gem, I would say. Got some mild Evanescence vibes on here, and it's just a good cool weather type gem. This is definitely something that you could listen to late November, December, that type of stuff. This is definitely something you could listen to in late November, December when the Christmas lights are out and it's colder weather and that type of stuff, as far as it just being crisper and cooler, and some of those activities, McRibs being out and about, and some of those cool kind of things that are kind of around that time, the pumpkin spice lattes and some of those type things. This would have to say it's a good gem for that. This definitely works in that sort of atmosphere. But in terms of some of the songs I didn't enjoy on here, like there weren't many. But to talk about some of these, like I kind of felt like the foresty kind of feel of Twilight was just not appealing enough. I like the concept of some of the production fare about it, but it just was not quite as catchy. Like I feel like Vanessa Carlton definitely had like some of these piano ones down. I definitely think that Vanessa Carlton should have done another song like Rinse and Wanted. I just think that Twilight was decent, but it's kind of foresty, just kind of ghoulish, but not really ghoulish in a good way type feel. Just didn't really have like the complete execution that it needed. And then Prince was just kind of an up-tempo song that just didn't work that well. That's what I was talking about before, how Vanessa Carlton kind of struggled with doing some of these more up-tempo songs just because she doesn't really step out wholesomely on this album. So Prince was just kind of a lackluster one at attempting that. Paradise was just kind of like a house cleaning type song that just was kind of more down tempo and just didn't work that well. And then Unsung was kind of like an upbeat kind of song. It's probably more upbeat, a little bit more upbeat than like Ordinary Day. Unsung was a little bit more upbeat than Ordinary Day and Pretty Baby, the follow-up singles to 1,000 Miles, but it just didn't have like the matched energy of 1,000 Miles, and it attempted it, but it just really struggled to do it. I think Vanessa Carlton, apart from songs like 1,000 Miles and Paint It Black, just really was not able to figure out how to have like a more kind of contemporary kind of jive as far as stepping out and like that sort of fare. She's definitely compelling. She has personality, and she has like a certain dark art about her that's pretty interesting as far as that kind of goes. I can see it in like in small traces, but I just look after it. The upbeat and the up tempo songs just really did not deliver on here for the most part. I mean, there's definitely some things on here that just have some interesting fares. I do like these homely songs. I do like these bookstore songs. I do like some of these kind of like Evanescence-like songs, but it's just the up-tempo moments just didn't quite compare on here. That's kind of the concept about it, but me looking after and me liking basically 7 out of 11 songs on this album, I'm going to go ahead and give this album like an 8.75 out of 10. I really like this album. I really had some enjoyment out of it, despite the fact that one of the bigger complaints is just the fact that it wasn't a single as catchy as 1,000 Miles. That one was just kind of a flash in a pan, which is kind of disappointing because she deserved more of a chance. I think if she had carved out this niche a little bit better and had another piano beat as good as 1,000 Miles on here, it definitely would have soared and gotten her a lot more fair. This album went platinum. I think it probably could have been a multi-platinum album like Avril Lavigne and Kelly Clarkson if she had done that. So that's just kind of the concept. She's not a one-hit wonder, but it can be easy to graph her as such just because the concept that there's really not a song with a beat or production work as catchy as 1,000 Miles. And it's not to say that there isn't. I feel like Paint It Black, Wanted, and Rinse are all other good songs that kind of do that, but it's just kind of the concept that they're just not singles, and you have to look after it, just being able to say that it's just in terms of like in terms of the follow-up songs that were released to radio, it just didn't have it. But the social score I'm going to give a 6.75 to, because I think 1,000 Miles is going to be the song that catches the girth of like the attention on this particular album. And the unfortunate thing is I just feel like songs like Ordinary Day and Pretty Baby just don't capture the attention quite as wholesomely as they need to. They just don't have the production work or the snappy chorus or just the overall effectual kind of template for being able to do it. It's not like they're bad songs, but they're just not sheer full-blown attention grabbing. So that's kind of the concept. There are some other songs on here like Paint It Black and Rinse and Wanted and some of those type moments and even Sway, but I would have to say and stuff that it just doesn't quite have like the sheer bite as far as the venom, as far as like an addictive kind of stepping out. It's just not like wholesomely like a weekend album. It's not to say it's a bad album. It's just kind of more kind of centered and steadfast, just in like its more homely sense. That's just kind of the thing about it I would have to say. But in terms of the future, like Vanessa Carlton has dropped follow-up albums. I do kind of want to see what her 2004 album is about, and she's dropped albums since at least up to 2020, so we'll see if we'll get some more stuff from her, and I do want to at least review her 2004 album, so we'll get to some more of those as time goes along.